Hello, welcome to my channel if you're new here, or welcome back if you're coming from any of my other content or videos. Today I will be talking about something a little bit different. I will be getting a Q&A on different questions that maybe I've been asked, or I've talked a little bit to my coworkers and other people who are in the swimming industry and asked them some good, what would you ask if you are a non-swimmer? And I'm going to read them out today and respond. So I, for this video at least, have to read off my computer for the most part because I'm reading the questions. Although I also kind of have to make sure I'm getting the answer right. So I'll be trying to connect with you guys while reading these questions. So the first one I got is, what if I panic while in the water? If you panic while in the water, the first thing to do is always to roll onto your back and try to float. Floating conserves the most energy in the pool. So it's one of the first steps that we always recommend as lifeguards or water safety instructors, and it's usually the first thing they teach you in swim lessons because it is so important. However, if you can't float, or you know that you want to get to the wall, because that is the second most important thing to do, is to get to a wall and stop yourself from drowning, I would definitely try to get to a wall, whether it's with breaststroke or some kind of modified froggy or anything that you can do. If you can't swim, like I talked about rolling onto your back, make sure you're trying to wave for help, or at least, I know drowning is often silent and you might not have enough energy to yell, but try to yell or try to wave, because the moment someone sees you waving or yelling, you will get the help usually that you need. Compared to just floating, sometimes floating on your back, a lot of lifeguards won't recognize drowning. They definitely will recognize it if you can't get to the wall while swimming, but that does waste a lot of energy. So you kind of have a few options there. The second question is, how deep is too deep when it comes to swimming in the water? Too deep for most people is anywhere in the pool where you can't stand and get air. So this is true for most, even intermediate swimmers as well as children. I know it's very tempting to go into the deep end all the time, but for a lot of people that's too deep, because at least in my pool we went all the way to 6 foot, and a lot of little kids, when they do start the drowning process, try to bob up and down to try to get air, and if you're that deep, you really can't do much except float on your back or try to get to a wall. So I would recommend staying where you can stand. That's where I tell most little kids to stay. Deep end is very tempting, but sometimes it's just not on our bucket list for the day. If you're not a strong swimmer, try to stay, like I just said, where your feet can touch the bottom, unless you're heavily supervised or wearing a life jacket. That's the only two exceptions I will say to not being where you can stand. The next one is, can I swim alone? Every single person who's ever worked in the swim industry or anywhere around that just shook their head no. Even as a lifeguard, we don't swim alone. I know if I go out to swim laps, or my coworker goes out to swim laps, almost always will another person go out there, and even if they're not on stand, go out there and sit on the pool deck and make sure that there's no signs of drowning or anything like that. Nobody should ever be swimming alone, even if they're an extremely talented swimmer, or if you're a beginning swimmer especially, because drowning isn't just I can't swim. Although that is the majority of accidents that occurs because people do not know how to swim, it can be from exhaustion, it can be from, a medical issue. Maybe you had a heart attack, or maybe you suddenly realize you're extremely dehydrated and, you lose all your energy and you have nothing to conserve. Drowning can happen to anyone at any time, especially, injuries in, on, and around the water. So it's really, really important to always have somebody there. This is, true for everyone. Nobody should ever be in the water by themselves. The next one is, do I need a life jacket if I think that I can swim? The answer is yes, but it kind of depends about the situation. If you're in an area where you can stand and your head is above the water, for most instances it's no, because you're in the shallow end. If you're in the deep end and you know that you're a little bit of an intermediate swimmer, I would say yes. However, it's kind of up to the pool and the regulations. This is a subjective topic, because where I would need a life jacket, the next person would not need a life jacket, or where I might need help, someone else might not need help. Or vice versa. I don't know if I got that right, but you guys know what I'm talking about. So it's really important to always consider these ideas and remember that at the end of the day, it's safer to wear one than to not wear one. Additionally, if you're boating, kayaking, paddleboarding, or in open waters, you always need to wear a life jacket. Most organizations, like if you're going kayaking through a specific group, or like if you're swimming open water, through like a camp or something, pretty much always will they force you to wear a life jacket. And although this seems kind of annoying, especially if you're like a good swimmer, like as a kid, I was on swim team and I always thought to myself, like, why do I need this if I know I can swim? But it's really important to remember that it's not you half the time that they're worried about. It's more so the water, because if an injury happens while you're paddleboarding, let's say the boat flips and you get injured somehow, you won't be able to like properly swim the way you used to. Or if suddenly there's currents or waves or fatigue, those skills that you've been working all your life on may no longer be valuable to you anymore. Like you can't use them. So it's really, really important to always make sure that you're using the right life jacket protocols, as well as wearing the right type of life jacket. I did make a whole separate video on that because that's a really, really important topic that a lot of people don't know about. So the answer to that one is usually yes, sometimes no. And then the last question for today is, how often should I take breaks? This is also very subjective. It kind of depends on the person. I would recommend everyone take breaks every 30 to 45 minutes, whether this is like to reapply sunscreen, drink some water, to sit on the edge for a little bit, because swimming is a really hard exercise. I feel like a lot of like skilled swimmers don't recognize this anymore. Whereas like when you were learning how to swim, you realized how hard swimming was. You had to pair all these different skills together, moving your arms, breathing, and kicking at the same time, as well as like if you've ever done drills for swimming, like just using your arms, you realize that it's like a really difficult process, and swimming is like really difficult when you don't recognize it. So I would always recommend taking breaks a lot, especially if it's hot outside, because you don't recognize how dehydrated you are. You don't recognize how hot it is. You don't recognize that you are turning, tomato red, and maybe you are into these signs of like severe sunburn, you know what I mean? So I think it's really important to take breaks around that time period. However, if you're like doing swim team, or you're just kind of like standing in the water, these might differ. Maybe you're a really, really strong swimmer and you can go a long time without taking breaks, or maybe you just started swimming and you want to take breaks every 10 minutes. It's really up to you. I would just say it's important to always take the like easier way out and just be like, oh, I need to take breaks every 10 minutes because I'm a new swimmer, rather than be like, I don't know, I don't think I need to know how to take breaks. I don't need to take breaks. I'm perfectly fine. And then like you become extremely fatigued and start, struggling to swim. I think it's, much better to take, the first one on that one. But it's just codes for, even I would recommend to set boundaries, which is another video I talked about, for your kids on this idea, because kids will not set boundaries for themselves. They will not take breaks willingly half the time. I've learned this, especially with summer camps. Those kids will not get out. And as a parent, it's kind of your duty to make sure your kids are, keeping up to date on being healthy, because a lot of them won't get out and they won't recognize how long they've been in there. They're having fun, and that's okay. The number one rule, well, actually for swimming, it's like number 50 rule, because there's a lot of more important things in that. But like in terms of like have fun, like it's the number one rule is to always have fun. So for kids at least. So they're always just trying to have fun, and you need to make sure that they're staying safe as well. So these are my Q&A tips. Hopefully you learned something, and if you didn't and you still have questions, feel free to comment them, or I'll leave some other like resources up in the comment section that may talk about other Q&A topics, or just some general swimming knowledge so that you guys can go and look and see if any of your questions are in there. As always, I have to make the disclaimer that I am a Girl Scout and a lifeguard, water safety instructor. However, I am not the head of the Red Cross. What this means is, although I'm pretty certified to talk about this and to teach people stuff, information may change and it may be updated, whereas my videos will not be updated since this is for a gold award project. So I would always make sure to check like Red Cross sites or private agencies to make sure you're getting the good content and everything. I know the best example of this is how CPR was changed a few years ago. The way that we do CPR changed. It's now like, not really acceptable to do CPR without a mask. So it's really important to keep up to date in case something is a little bit different from what I talked about. So thank you guys so much. Hopefully you learned something, and I will see you guys back for another video.